Welcome to the podcast, Sabrina. I really appreciate your time, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have today. I think that our listeners are going to find a lot of value in it. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited, and I appreciate you giving me some time. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you. Well, I know a little bit about you, but would you be kind enough to introduce yourself and to the listeners and share a little bit about your personal story and what led you to what you do today?
Awesome. Sure. I'm Sabrina Winters, and I have an estate planning and probate firm here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Started it in 2005. But my purpose of having a firm the way I have it is really my story. I was graduating law school about 20 years ago, and my uncle was very sick, and it was too late for him to get anything in writing. Although we had encouraged him to do it, he chose not to have any estate planning documents in writing. Well, he ended up getting very sick and in the hospital, and was resuscitated a few times before he finally passed away. But during that time, all of our hands were tied because he had nothing in writing. He told nobody what he wanted, and the family all disagreed on what needed to happen. So I watched my father have to watch his brother pass away in front of him without being able to end his life peacefully. So years of wanting to do something in the criminal law field, that was solidifying what my purpose was going to be for my firm. No family should have to go through what my family did, and have to suffer that way. Nobody held our hands. Nobody guided us. We weren't helped. And so that's the purpose for why I've created the firm the way, it is now, almost 20 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine how heartbreaking that is when you hear stories of friends and family where nothing was in writing. You can't intervene. Everybody's fighting once, they're gone, and it's, and you lose half of it, if not more, just going through the courts in terms of like what's left, assets and properties and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're doing, and I can see how empowering the conversation is going to be already.
Yeah.
So you work primarily, I know we've talked about divorced women in our conversation and preparing for this, but you work with families. Like, what type of people do you work with?
So most of my clients are, in their 40s to 70s. I have even clients in their 80s who are, planning for the first time. I do help women a lot through the process after they get divorced. And I love it when they come to me before their divorce, during that separation. But clients who've lost capacity already, unfortunately, is not the area I can help. They're going to probably need a guardianship for their loved one. But typically those are who my preferred clients are, and who I really truly enjoy helping.
Yeah. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I wish I would have consulted with a professional before my divorce. I think things would have turned out way, way different. So I love that we're having the conversation so that maybe we can help others prepare.
Right.
So what would you say is a common thread or pattern that you've noticed amongst the divorced women that you've worked with, particularly when they're in the initial stages of like starting to move on or planning to divorce?
Pretty much the common denominator throughout all of them is two. One, they don't have any idea that this was something they needed to address. Nobody ever told them. They just never heard about having to do this.
Yeah.
But also number two, they were just scared. They're scared. They went through, what was something that was going to be for the rest of their life that just ended, and that whole process is scary and sometimes stressful and long, that they're happy to have survived that. And then now they got to talk to somebody else who's also a lawyer, who is going to do what now,
that
right?
feels scary and intimidating too, because you just hear horror stories.
Yep.
It
So, I mean, it's scary to talk about your own passing and your illness and, leaving kids behind to be raised by an ex.
Hmm.
But those are really important conversations to have. But if nobody helps get the message out that they need to start this even during their separation time, how are they going to
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
So that's my goal.
So what are some of those pieces that you help them with? It goes beyond just the financials and the properties
Yeah.
or assets or what have you. What other things are come into play for somebody who's not familiar with estate planning or the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't understand what estate planning is. I mean, it's kind of a vague term, and if you define it, most people would consider it, well, I don't have a lot of stuff, so I don't need to estate plan. But with my uncle's situation, and more recently with my father's, the biggest, hugest issue was that my uncle didn't have a healthcare document in place, and my father did. That's how my uncle's life was not ended the way it should have been ended, because nobody agreed and he had nothing in writing. So to me, having those healthcare documents are so important, but many don't think that that's part of the planning. They just think, well, I'm married, so my spouse is going to make that decision. Or, well, we're divorced now, my documents don't count, or matter. And that's not true either. So it's important to have those healthcare documents in
Mm-hmm.
my mind as one of the biggest part of estate planning sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. Having gone through the death of my father, I think that the biggest blessing, I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll
Whew.
both cry.
Ah, honestly, I feel like the biggest blessing was that he left everything in writing. He had all his ducks in a row,
Mhm.
like everything from the assets, but like the medical stuff, the decision making, all the decision making was done. He decided everything beforehand. So being there and having these conversations with the doctors um just made it easier, because it's like, okay, this is what he wanted. So it's okay. It just made it
That's the goal.
okay to let go. The last thing I wanted to do was make the wrong decision, quote unquote.
Right.
It's like, what if this isn't the right thing? So that was really like reading his own writing, if you will, his own words. It's like, okay, this is what he wanted. So it just made it a lot easier going through such a difficult time,
Yeah.
that this was the right thing.
How long
So
ago did your dad pass?
it was 2016, which
Yeah.
feels
And
like yesterday to me.
it's
Would have.
still raw, but you still
Hmm.
feel that gift that he left,
Hmm.
which my father left exactly what he wanted. I mean,
Hmm.
didn't make the decision to make the next step to peacefully end his life any easier or less hurtful.
Right.
But at the end of the day, what we came away with was we knew we did what he wanted to do. As hard as that
Hmm.
decision was, we did what he wanted to do. And a lot of people don't understand that doing estate planning, yes, it's for our personal needs, but it's also a gift to family.
Hmm.
My father, till he died last month, never really was sure that he did the right thing for his brother. And that was almost 20 years ago. That is a lot of guilt and grief to carry for a very long time. But what your dad did for you
Yeah,
and what my dad did for us is an incredible gift. And I'm not
absolutely.
carrying guilt or
Absolutely.
question.
Sabrina, your dad passed away last month.
He
Did I hear
did.
you correctly? I'm
He
so
did.
sorry to hear
Thank
that. That
you.
is very raw. Oh my gosh. And
Thank
you're
you.
here with us today. I appreciate that, because I know
That people
how
know.
difficult that first year is. It's
Yeah.
everything. So wow. My heart goes out to you
Thank
and your
you.
family. So, how do you guide divorced women in achieving financial stability and independence, especially if they've haven't managed finances before? Is this something that you can help guide them through?
Absolutely. And that, I see that a lot. It's kind of how marriages are sometimes.
Hmm.
The responsibilities are split. Maybe she was a stay-at-home mom, and that's a lot of work, and it's 24/7, and the husband does all the other stuff. Part of what my processes are is, at the beginning, I want to know what your assets are. what did you end up with in your divorce? And sometimes that's not even something they completely understand. So I help them understand we're empowering you to be able to do this on your own right now and to manage your assets, not only know what they are, but how to manage them and what their purpose is, like what's an IRA versus a money market. What is a beneficiary? How many times, what assets need those? And it's part of the education process of when clients work with me. Know your assets first. It's empowering to be able to do this all on your own. And they've been through a pretty horrible event that a lot of people don't sit with them and hold their hand to get through this next stage. Because I mean, you're mourning, right? You're mourning your father's loss. I'm mourning mine. They're mourning the loss of a marriage. That's big.
Right.
And their emotions are everywhere. And they oftentimes forget that they've got assets now that are their responsibility. And no one's going to manage them for them. They have to understand it. So I encourage them to just kind of be prepared for the process, because at the end, they're going to have everything that they need to move on solo and to really manage it 100% the way they need to.
Yeah, I love that. So when women come to you, they've kind of already gone through the divorce, or do you help them prepare? Like, okay, I'm thinking about getting a divorce. I want to consult with you. Like, what do I do? Like, like I want to make sure I'm setting myself up
Right. Well,
properly to protect
I
myself.
love that, because I'm a big, huge planner. It's just who I am. So I would love it if a woman is getting ready to maybe even think about a divorce, or maybe just the separation. Maybe divorce isn't even really what they want, but the separation, coming to somebody like me early, because oftentimes we're talking to them about, here's what you have, but here's the whole bucket of things you don't know you have. Go get that information first. And I always want to make sure that they're not just relying on me. They really need partners in this whole process. I'm one small part of that circle of people who help, but they do need a really badass divorce attorney. They need somebody beforehand too, who's going to analyze their assets and help them figure out what they're going to come away with. Their own CPA, their own advisor. Like, this is a team effort. They don't have to do it alone. I'm just a small part of it, an important part, but a small part.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. The younger me, it's like,
I think that's for all of us, right?
I wish I had my team in place. I did it. It wasn't until way later that I was like, wow, I just went through that blindly and just, just
Well, I
walked
think,
out of it. And,
women too, we can multitask so many things and do so many things well at the same time, that we're just checking things off that we know we have to do, getting through it like it's in our nature.
Yeah.
And then this falls on our plate. And it's like, well, I had no idea I needed to do this. Now, like, where do I go? Because once you tell a woman that this is what she needs to do, she's getting it done. She just needs to know she needs to do it sometimes. And who's the person to help her with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it's like I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I needed to get out of that. And those were the steps that I needed to do, which was just the divorce, part. And then and there was no guidance. It's like, hey, you should think about this. Like, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And so nobody said anything to me. I didn't know. It's like, okay, you should think about this. You should make sure this is aligned. Make sure, your ducks are in a row. I didn't even think about that until later, and it was too late. And it was like, oh, what did I do?
There are lots of things that I can't help clients with. And a lot of those things come out as we're having our meetings. I'm not afraid to say that's out of my lane, but it is so important for you to do this. Let's get you with somebody.
Absolutely.
And so I think the family attorneys need to do a better job, the ones that are not, in advising their clients that I'm helping you with this, but I really need you to go see an estate planning attorney. Do you really want your soon-to-be ex being able to make a medical decision for you, or worse yet, have the power to end your life? And And they don't know that that's the case. Like, you need somebody who's experienced to kind of bring
Mm-hmm.
this to your attention. And I wish that more of them would do more
Mm-hmm.
of that counseling and
Mm-hmm.
get them to the right person. Because I know
Yeah.
if I was divorced, I wouldn't want my ex being able to make the decisions I made for my dad.
Oh, yeah.
Way.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I agree, agree. So, can you share some advice around estate planning for women, how to make sure that they are protected in the event of the death of a spouse and how to protect their assets should they pass away and why that's important? And not just the assets now that we're talking, it's really like all the medical, like,
All the
you know,
stuff.
yeah, all the stuff.
Well, first I would say I'm a very independent woman. I've just always been. It's how I was raised. It's who I am. So I know everything that's happening in my financial life with my spouse. I know it all. I've got it
Mhm,
all, everything on the date that things are automatically paid. I know our assets. I know who to call. We both do.
mhm,
And that's the very first thing I want women to do when they are married, especially. Do not neglect your assets, because your soon to be ex may pass away before that divorce is final. Then what? If you're raising little kids and you are not working, is there a life insurance policy that's going to bring
mhm,
cash immediately to you? If you don't know that, it's going to be a really way bigger burden than it should be. It's already horrible, but why add on top of that? So that's the very first thing I would tell them. Do not ignore your finances in your marriage.
mhm,
Know everything that's going on always. That
mhm,
includes passwords, phone numbers for
mhm,
advisors, who's your CPA, who's your banker, like, where are you going to get cash from to pay the next several weeks? Because your brain is going to be slush.
mhm,
So that's the first thing. Please don't forget about your finances.
mhm,
Um, and the other thing would be too is, have open conversations during your marriage when it's a good time,
mhm,
uh, on who's going to care for minor kids if you're both gone, because
mhm,
that's part of the planning as well. In your will or trust, we need to talk about, if your ex is passed away already, where are your kids going to go? You
mhm,
can't rely on your ex to do that, but you can rely on the pair of you when you're in a happy
mhm,
marriage,
mhm,
have those conversations. To
mhm,
me, that's really important.
mhm,
And also to know that it's okay to be scared, not know what to do, and it's okay to ask for help.
mhm,
We're such independent people that asking a question on, yeah, I don't know what that is, I'm going to try to find out myself. Oftentimes we can't. And we feel
mhm,
like because we have to put up this strong front and this tough exterior, that asking questions makes us
mhm,
look weak. And
mhm.
we're not going to look weak, right?
Right.
We have it
Yeah.
under control. But don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Be vulnerable to get help.
That's a very important point. And along those lines, so women in my age group, women in midlife are often already divorced, 50% of us. But so there's this concept of remarrying again. And so how do you suggest to people? I mean, I don't even know how to start that conversation. If it were like ever to get to a point where, okay, I might remarry again, like
Right.
how do you plan for this? Do you have any advice around that?
Oh, absolutely. Don't be afraid of a prenuptial agreement. Don't
Yes.
be scared of that.
Mhm,
I know a lot of people look at it that as it's a contract and it's just all about money. Well, so's marriage. It is a contract, that when it's broken ends up in divorce.
mhm,
But when you are blending families, you have to be very careful on what you come into the marriage with. If it's another divorce, what are you going to leave with?
mhm,
And that's just protecting what you're bringing to the table. And I don't think women should be afraid to have something like that or to address it. You don't want to go through that fight again. Not
mhm,
that the next one's going to end that way. We always go into it, right? Knowing and praying that
mhm,
it's going to be forever. But that's not always the case. Protect
mhm,
yourself. Don't be afraid of a prenuptial.
mhm,
The other thing too is I have a lot of women who are getting ready to be married who have chosen to just plan for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
which is fine too. You don't have to plan with your spouse. There could be some roadblocks. So there could be some things that we want to do, but we can't, but you can still plan without your partner. And
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. As long as you understand the next steps and what,
Mm-hmm.
some roadblocks are, you make that informed decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess this is also where, yeah, the decision making comes in as well for your medical, in case that,
Mhm.
oh, this can get hairy.
Yeah.
Who's
And
going to
it,
make the decision? The
right.
adult kids or the new
Big
spouse?
deal. And imagine if you have adult kids from a previous marriage, now you're getting remarried.
Mm-hmm.
Those adult kids might be the ones that you'd want to be making these medical decisions for you. Well, it's not automatic. That's not always the case. So you have to have that healthcare power of attorney that's going to name those
Mm-hmm.
people, whether it's joint or in consecutive order, on who's going to be making those medical decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, I've got women clients who don't want their new spouse to be that person
Mm-hmm.
for several reasons. Well, we need to make sure that we have that in writing then, because we
Mm-hmm.
don't want anybody assuming at the hospital that that's
Mm-hmm.
the person,
Yeah.
making those decisions.
Yeah. Wow, that's such an important point. So much to think about there.
I know, and it's
Uh,
scary, but it's a
yeah.
necessity.
If that power of attorney, is that what you call it when somebody has the ability to make those medical decisions for you?
Yeah,
Is
they
that?
call it an agent in North Carolina and a
Oh,
health
okay.
power of attorney. Yeah, it's a
Oh, okay.
document.
Okay. So when that is not in place and you're remarried, does the new spouse automatically have the decision-making power?
Not always, because
Mhm.
you have to I always revert back to the document. So if
Yeah.
they had an old document in place, we look for language that says, look, if my spouse is the person making these decisions, if we are separated or divorced, he doesn't get to make those decisions.
Mhm,
But you
mhm.
have to go back to the document, because sometimes it's still the ex-spouse that
Yeah,
gets those
and
decisions.
if oof,
Yeah.
yeah, ugh. And if
Yeah.
there's no documents in place, uh,
That is almost exactly, I'm human, right? So I have the same life problems as everybody else and the same life drama. But that was exactly the situation with my uncle. They had never been divorced, but separated for 30 years.
mm,
And because nobody agreed, she was still technically his wife.
oh,
So we had to wait for her to fly in from Italy, and he had passed before she got there. But
oh,
that's where the document would have been the exact thing that we needed. He could have done one that named my dad, who was always taking care of his brother. But that's exactly what happened.
wow,
They
wow,
were not
wow.
divorced. They were
Yeah.
still technically married,
Oh,
and
geez.
that's who they were waiting on.
Oof, this is such a needed conversation. I am so glad you are here because woof, I'm going to send this episode to everybody I know.
Yep, absolutely. It's important stuff. It's scary
Yeah,
stuff, but it's
yeah.
important to know.
So good to know. Okay, so you see women in a very vulnerable state, I'm sure, whether they're going through a divorce or a loss. And I know that you're big on empowering women. So what are some initial steps that you suggest to women to regain their confidence and their sense of self after a divorce?
I think knowing how to have the control over all of their life, everything about their life, they only have to think of themselves. And if they have kids, now they're thinking about the kids too, but they've always been thinking about the kids.
Mhm.
It's okay to self-care for yourself. It is not selfish. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of women feel like if they take a day off and have a babysitter for their kids, that it's selfish. Like, I should be able to take care of my kids and also be tired. Like, I don't need to be able to do that. But it's okay. And it's needed,
Mhm.
it's necessary, and it's for our health. And I try to tell them, first of all, I want you to take a day for yourself, whatever that day looks like, that doing something that makes you happy, even if it is sitting on the couch with a
Mhm.
blanket and the remote control for the entire day without somebody asking you for an apple juice or where did you put my pants or have you seen this?
Mhm.
Do it. It's what makes you happy, but know that it's not selfish.
Mhm.
You got
Yeah.
to and get it
So,
out of your
so
head.
true. It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast episode yesterday, and this woman, Jessica Dennehy, wrote a book called Selfish is a Superpower. And I
Uh-huh.
thought, that's weird. But when I listened to the podcast episode, it made so much sense. It's like the selfish has a bad connotation,
Yep.
it's seen as bad, but really when you're selfish, it's really self-care. You're really
It's
taking care of yourself so that you can pour into the people that you love and the things that you want to do. So, yeah, it's
100% true, but we feel guilty.
yeah,
We
the
just
total
feel
guilt.
guilty every time we do something for ourselves when there's all these other people that need our help or all these
Right.
other things that need our attention. Well, they're still all going to be there. It's okay.
Yeah, and the
Breath.
beautiful thing is that when we do that, we're teaching them to do this for themselves as
Right.
well. We
That's
want
a good
them
point.
to take care of themselves, right? We want them to put themselves first and prioritize themselves and their mental health and their peace. So why not be an example of that to them? It's
Lead by
it's
example. You're
yeah,
right.
it's the way that I've kind of started to think about that. So
Good for you. That's part of being empowered.
yeah, yeah,
Good
I
for
love that.
you.
So how do you emphasize the importance of mental health and self-care to women who might be struggling to prioritize themselves post-divorce? I guess you probably maybe already answered that question.
Just get it out of your head that it's selfish and unacceptable. Just go do
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
because the opposite sex does
Yeah.
it, right?
Seriously.
They're
That's what
blessed with no guilt.
they like take off
They're,
for golf for the entire day or for weekend fishing trips, like
yeah,
without a second thought.
which
There's
is
no guilt
great.
there.
Like, I think that our spouses should go do that because they need to be
Absolutely.
present and good for us. And then, I find myself doing the same thing. My husband might be working a game the whole Saturday. I'm like, okay, so I can clean the whole house by 12 o'clock. I'll go grocery shop. I'll have dinner ready. And then by the end of the day, I'm like, I did nothing for
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, you're
I'm
and you're
absolutely
exhausted.
exhausted. The house looks great, right? And the dinner's cooked and the fridge is full, but I am exhausted.
Right,
And why do we do that? Like, I
right.
could have done the housework tomorrow
Yes,
and
and
sat
that's the
around
thing.
today.
The housework will be there tomorrow. Trust me.
Unfortunately, that's the truth,
It's not going anywhere. The laundry, it's not going to walk away. It's
right?
okay. It's safe.
But you know what
So,
I started doing is this, and I like to clean my house. I put my headphones on, I listen
yeah,
to
me
my
too.
music, and it's great. 2, 3 hours go by like that. But I'm super busy, and I also don't want to be super busy on the weekend.
Hmm.
I gave myself the grace to have my house cleaned once a month,
Yep.
top to bottom, whatever it is I want,
Hmm.
just clean it for me.
Hmm.
And it has done wonders for me because
Hmm.
3 hours that I could
Hmm.
do whatever it is that I would
Yeah.
have been doing if I wasn't cleaning the house.
Yeah. And
And that's
sometimes we don't even know what that is because we
right.
spend so much time taking care of others and cleaning the house that we don't
Exactly.
even know what that thing would be.
What would it be? And that's another good point. We lose who we are.
Hmm.
Like, do we have hobbies?
Right.
If
That's
you
what
give me the
happens.
opportunity to go do a hobby, what would that be? And
Right.
I'd have to think like,
Hmm.
hold on a second, because what would that hobby be? I
Mm.
don't know.
Well, that's what happened to me during
Yeah.
divorce, and I felt like I got lost in the relationship. It's like, who am I
Did
anyways? Once the kids were with their dad, I'm like, huh,
what do you
what do I do with myself?
think? I'm sure that it felt empty
Yeah.
and it's a big void that you have to
Hmm.
fill now, but it
Hmm.
was all about you, but you've never put yourself first.
Yeah. Yep.
So
100%.
now you have to put yourself
That's
first.
when it became very apparent
Yep,
that holy moly, I did nothing for myself. Like
that's
I don't
right.
even know who I am.
You raised amazing kids, and that is
Yeah.
one heck
Yeah.
accomplishment.
I
But when
100%.
those amazing kids are looking at mom who's exhausted, who doesn't know what to do with herself when her kids are not around, and when you only find the joy with your kids, that's
Mhm.
not good for your kids either,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 100%. And that happens also as an empty nester. It
Yeah.
kind of happened again. It's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
But it was easier at this point. I think I was a little bit more in touch with myself, or I am more in touch with myself, and I have lots of hobbies, lots of things to do. But
You
it's
learn.
also, yeah, I learned, and I also love being that example for them. It's like, okay, just because I'm 50 something doesn't mean my life is over. Like I have so much to do, so many things. So it's so excited about all the possibilities of
Right.
of all
And
the
and
things.
why don't we ever share our actual age? Like we always, I'm like in my 50s. Like, men are so proud of being whatever age they are in their 50s or their 60s,
Yeah.
but we're always trying to like act like we should be in this different zone. Like I'm
Yeah.
53, I don't care. I'll
Right.
be happy when I'm 55.
Yeah.
But that's something I learned. I
Yes.
wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
And
And I agree. I agree. I am very comfortable actually saying how old I am. And I say it all the time on my podcast. I'm, 51 years old. And I think
right,
and I love it. I love that I'm 51 years old. There's so much wisdom that comes from our lived experiences, and yet I feel like there's so much more to do and learn. I feel like
right.
I'm in a perfect spot personally.
You
So,
are. There's always room to do more, and
mhm,
there's always room to change where you thought you were going to go. You can
mhm,
change directions, and you know what? That's
100%.
okay.
Yeah, 100%, which is exactly what I'm doing with this podcast. So,
Awesome. I love it.
so, so how can then, in your opinion, based because you work with women, how do you feel that women can leverage their pain and struggle of divorce or loss into building a positive and empowered future for themselves?
Oh, I think it's first, you got to put yourself first for a change.
Hmm.
Stop putting everybody else first.
Yeah.
The
It's going
minute you
back to
start
that.
yeah, the minute you start putting yourself first, you start realizing all of the things that you used to love were missing for so
Hmm.
long.
Hmm.
If you're a stay-at-home mom in your marriage, everything about your life every day was about kids.
Hmm.
Juice boxes, snacks, doctor's appointments, play dates, soccer practice, football, dance. It all revolved around the kids. And now have it revolve around you.
Hmm.
That's the very first thing. Be okay with it and
Hmm.
make it happen.
Yeah. I love
Nothing
that.
wrong with it.
Yeah, I love that. So switching up a little bit here, if you could go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Oh, the biggest thing I would tell myself, which is what I have told my daughter, is do not let the opinion of other people of you let yourself see yourself differently.
Yeah.
And I did that my whole life.
Yeah.
Always reflected everything that people said about me and put it into my brain and
Hmm.
convinced myself that that's what I was, that's
Hmm.
who I was, and that's how I was. And I regret it to a certain degree, but I think I've evolved as a mom, as a wife, as a professional, as an attorney to really understand that if you're not talking positive about yourself every day, nobody else is going to do that for you.
Hmm.
Stop listening and taking on what other people say and think about you. You
Hmm.
will never be who you were supposed to be then.
Hmm. I love that advice. That is beautiful.
Now, it
I'm
took me
gonna,
50 years to be okay
yeah,
with,
yes.
but I
But
am
if we
there
start
and I
them,
don't care anymore.
yeah, and if we start them off young, if we start driving that message home at a young age, then they grow up with that. And I think that's lovely. I think that's great.
Hopefully, right?
Yeah,
Hopefully they do,
hopefully.
but
Yeah.
it's a job. So
Yeah. Oh, thank you. This has been such a lovely conversation. What is one last piece of advice that you would have for our listeners who are women in midlife between the ages
yeah,
of 40 to 60 overall, whether they're divorced, married, widowed, single? Any words of advice you'd like to leave them with?
I would say do not be afraid to start this conversation. Most clients, when they come see me and they're married, it's usually the wife that has called to make that appointment.
Mhm.
Have open conversations in your marriage about this stuff. It's
Mhm.
just like talking about where are we going to go on vacation. Most
Mhm.
people spend more time figuring that out than
Mhm.
they do addressing these things. So
Mhm.
I would just say, do not be afraid to pick up that phone and make that appointment.
Mhm.
I promise that is probably going to be the scariest thing that you'll have to do throughout the whole process with me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Be
Okay.
scariest, and then you're done.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
do it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. So where can people find you if they want to talk to you or learn more about you? And can you help people in all states, given that you're in North Carolina? Share with us what some of your services are and where they can find
Sure.
you.
So I'm exclusive to estate planning and probate, and I can help estate planning clients that are residents of North Carolina. I
Mhm.
can help anybody in any state if they are the executor, if somebody died in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And I'm exclusive because I think everybody should stay in their lane. I don't
Mhm.
want to do real estate or go to traffic court or, I don't want to do any
Mhm.
of that. I chose to do just this.
Mhm.
And so my website is sabrinawinterslaw.com,
Mhm.
and I am on TikTok and Instagram, and it is
Mhm.
State Lawyer NC on both of
Mhm.
them. And North Carolina State Planning is our YouTube page. So we've got
Perfect.
a lot of educational videos that I
Nice.
suggest just watch them. And when
Yeah.
you come see me, it's going to be
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay. Oh, I'm going to link all that in the show notes. I think that
Thanks.
YouTube channel will be super helpful as well to learn and just kind of educate ourselves. I think that's always important. Okay. Well, one last question I like to ask every guest because it just kind of shows me a little bit more about their lovely
Okay.
personality is what is one thing you are loving right now? Whether it's a book or a skincare product or an activity, just one thing that you've been like obsessed over lately.
Oh, wow. Okay. Um, I'm going to have to say it's the purposeful alone time that I've taken.
Hmm. I
It's
love that.
in my favorite spot in the backyard. Now that the weather is a little cooler, it's with my cup of coffee and a blanket, usually early in the morning when nobody's awake.
Hmm. Yeah. I love that. And I wish that for everybody. It is
Me
the
too.
best. It is the
Amazing.
best.
Best therapy for free.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously. You get to know yourself. And I personally love my own company. So,
Have
so
to, right?
I
I think it's
love that.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sabrina, for being here today and for sharing your time and your expertise with us. I think that this is going to be a really empowering conversation, and at least to to plant that seed and have women go watch your YouTube videos and learn more about what they need to do, and then maybe give you a call or at least start this conversation with their partners, um, and spouses and families, and set themselves up for success, and less pain.
I hope they do because I want to see more women taking
Hmm.
control of this and not
Yes,
waiting for somebody else to do it for them.
yes, yes, 100%. I love that. Thank
Well,
you so
Sonia, I
much,
had such a
Sabrina.
nice time with you, and thank you for inviting me on.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Anytime.
Awesome. Bye.
Thank you, Sabrina.